Hello, everybody. Welcome to this video with myself and Mr. Ben Osbourne. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah.
Good. It's very nice to have you here. And you tried a lot harder than me. You've got a lovely shirt on and a lovely background as well. And I must work harder, so noted. And if you ever come on a tour with myself and Ben, you'll see we do offer different things. Even in our attire, Ben, that got a bit of teasing last time, didn't it, as
Well,
well?
well, you'll see that Sam's the smart one. It's the scruffy one. So I thought I better get up the standard on this Zoom. But
We,
anyway,
we've swapped it round, but the point of this Zoom actually is to talk you through some images from North Yorkshire, where myself and Ben run a light and land tour. And in fact, we want to entice you. We'd love you to come with us. We've got a couple of spaces available for our November tour, and it's a really, really beautiful locations and a variety of locations, and we're going to show you that through the images. But also, Ben and I approach things a little bit differently, but we had some really great creative chats whilst we were there, and a lot of the clients that came with us and the guests really enjoyed kind of throwing that around, and we had some good chats, didn't we, about processing and about shooting as well.
very much so. I think that's one of the strengths of having two different leaders on a tour is that you get two quite different perspectives on the same landscape, and also the guests who come along, you've all got your own opinions as well. So I think to sort of as a couple of guides, it's very useful to have two different people and two different approaches to landscape photography. So I think that really enhanced the tour.
Yeah, definitely. And Ben's jokes are generally better than mine, which is always good as well. But what we will do, I'm going to share the images and we'll walk through. We've got 10 or 11 images. Just be about half an hour or so. So we can tell you a little bit more info about the locations, but also we can have a little bit of a creative chat about some of the images. So let's just get into those. And here we go. So we're based in Robin Hood's Bay, which, and I should say actually, although we're going to talk about the photography here, the hotel we stay at is great. It's got really great views, good food. There's a bar, restaurant separate, and space for us to do some editing and whatnot. But this is from outside the hotel, Ben, isn't it? Because we do have access to this amazing view over Robin Hood's Bay.
Yeah, I mean, literally, a dawn shoot means going out the door, standing pretty much outside, and looking down over this scene. And depending on the state of the tide, you've got quite a lot of different elements within the view. Obviously, you've got this sort of sky and sea as sort of dominant features, but then there's this huge background of the point that goes out in the distance, and then in the foreground, these ridges of limestone. Which go out into the sea, and as the tide sort of comes in or recedes, they kind of appear and disappear. So, depending on the light, depending on the state of tide, you get a different view pretty much every morning, actually. And we were very lucky on the last tour that we had some absolutely beautiful dawns two or three times. One
Mm.
of them, in fact, there was mist coming down over the point in the distance there on the very last morning. So it can be quite a varied view, and it's very convenient as well. So an excellent start to a day.
Yeah, and it was a nice one because we could all be fairly close together, and there are some aesthetic, excuse me, some compositional challenges because of foregrounds and whatnot, and that was quite a good conversation to have. And actually, it's probably one of the few times, Ben, where we actually are quite close together, looking at the same view. And even then, there's different interpretations. But I think you and I tend to like spreading people out, encouraging the individual kind of to find things in different places, don't we? That we're not generally a turn up and all point in the same direction. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's generally not how we tend to operate, apart from in a couple of places here.
Yeah, definitely. I think most of the locations we go to, it's a question of exploring the sort of space around you and finding what works for you, and that can be a really interesting process. And it's a real sort of learning curve. Sometimes you go to a location and you think, I really can't see anything here. I can't see any images. I can't make it work. And then you wait and let a bit of time go past and sit down on a rock and have a look around, and things will come to you. And I think it's not always, as Sam says, it's not always the same for everyone. So most of the locations will have different elements that you can concentrate on. Certainly the ones inland have got either a bit of woodland or a bit of water. We'll come to that later. On the coast, you've got sort of rocks, or you've got the water, or you've got the background, or you've got something happening in different directions. And it's really a question of exploring that. And again, we can help facilitate the sort of way you articulate that through images.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move us down to, sorry, let me get my place in the right thing. This is down onto the kind of into the bay, into Robin Hood's Bay. There's a expansive beach as you saw a little bit of in the last image, and there's these really strong sea defense walls as well. And this is yours, Ben, isn't it? There was just sort of a serendipitous moment here.
Well, there was it was another dawn where I think I'd gone down towards the village, which is way down below the hotel, and the sun just caught this huge sort of rampart of concrete walls. Basically, without it, Robin Hood's Bay village would get washed away. So they built these sea defences, and this woman came around the corner with her little dog, and she was throwing the ball for it, and I just found the sort of juxtaposition of the girl, this very intimate scene of the girl with her dog, and he was desperate for the ball to be thrown, and he wanted to go and chase it, and so he's looking at her really keen, and she's looking down at him, saying, "Right, do you want me to throw it?" And there was that little thing going on, little cameo of human, well, and canine experience going
Mhm.
on down there, and then at the background there was this huge sort of golden wall, just sort of rather abrupt, which contrasted with the sort of intimate scene in the bottom left. And the lighting really basically made it all work. On a duller day, that might not have worked as a scene, but the lighting on the wall made it kind of very dramatic, and the
Mm.
lighting on the girl and the dog made it very sort of intimate. And that side lighting was just really beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous and lovely dealing with the curves in the composition, to really accentuate that. And actually, what's interesting about that sea defense wall is when the tide does come in and comes in quite high, if there is a bit of rough or more inclement weather, which can happen in Yorkshire in November, and we got a really good mix of weather actually. We got a bit of everything, didn't we? But if you do get some of those big seas coming in, you get some huge waves crashing off the seawall as well, and that can all be within the same day. So it's a great location. Even down in the bay, there's loads to do. I could do a week there, to be honest, without going everywhere else. But we do go everywhere else to give everyone a little bit of variation. Let's just keep us rolling because I don't want to be too long here, but because we want to show you this sort of eclectic mix of stuff. So one of the places we also go is to Saltwick Bay, where there's a couple of sea sort of stacks, as it were, very famous in that area. And actually, Joe Cornish, who's shot a lot around here, many of you who will know his back catalogue. He's got quite a few images from this area and Saltwick Bay, Saltwick Nab, etc. So we actually go there sometimes once, maybe twice. It depends a bit on the conditions. And we can vary up what time we go there because it's quite an interesting place depending on whether the tide's higher or lower. There's a lot of different ways you can deal with it. And this particular occasion, this was last year, there was just this really interesting pattern in the sky. And one of the things actually I spent a bit of time talking to people about was making sure they look up at what's happening in the sky. It seems kind of a really obvious thing, but a couple of people went away. I remember Elizabeth Ben saying to me, I'd never really looked at the sky in life generally. It sounds silly, but she said, I've never really concentrated on shapes in the sky, and I'm going to never forget that now. I'm always going to look at the sky for shapes. And so I suppose whenever I see a kind of interesting little, curve or extended shape, whatever it might be. And obviously, we had the moon out just here as well. And yeah, obviously, I'm a black and white guy a lot of the time. It just really worked for me as kind of a way to show a huge amount of nothingness in a way. And we can play with horizon positioning and things like that. But anyone who knows, you might recognize a little bit of where it is, but it's a slightly different take on that. Um, and a few people got different images of this pattern as it moved through. And whenever you see things like that and you watch them, they do vary over a few minutes. And that's part of the excitement of getting locked into a scene and concentrating on it, and everything else in the world sort of disappears behind you. And that's one of the joys of photography, I suppose. Let me just move on because what we wanted to show in this chat as well is kind of different interpretations and different scenes depending on different environments, different times of day, etc. So Ben, I know you found this lovely sort of leading, I suppose a ridge, little ledge, I suppose is the best way to describe it.
Yes, it was tiny actually. I mean, this rock's only about, I don't know, 50 centimeters wide or something like that. So I think this is even actually a phone shot, if I'm
Yeah.
allowed to admit that.
There's a couple,
Um,
there's two or three phone shots in here from both of us,
I think
actually.
there
Yeah.
are, and I mean, phones can be very useful because you can play with different angles, and actually you can visualize a shot, which then you can create on the camera if you want to. Actually, interesting. I just noticed the rock in the background on the far right is the rock that was in Sam's that last picture
Mm.
of yours, um, and I just thought you know, some of these intimate scenes, actually, when you get the right composition, you've got the line leading in from the bottom left, and you've also got these lines coming in from the side as well. That they lead to that sort of central rock, and then the sort of background kind of almost reflects that idea of rocks dotted around on a flat surface. And you can sort of create these compositions from really not very much. And when you're there, you think, I can't see anything here. And then you start working around it, and suddenly something all comes together, and all the different elements can work. And you can get things in there. In a way, you could sort of ask questions about whether that far rock in the far right-hand corner, I've forgotten the name of it. Is it Black Rock or something?
Black now,
Um,
Black now, I think. Yeah.
Black Nab, that's
Yeah.
it. Whether that is attractive or not, or whether it's a bit of a blip. Well, it is a bit of a blip, but it doesn't really matter. You create with the elements you've got there. You create the composition that works for you. And I think this was one of those occasions. And in fact, the light was very, very flat. We processed this in two different ways. Also, I showed this to Sam, and Sam said, "Oh no, you've done that too harsh. Let's soften this down." I think this is the harsher version, and Sam processed it in the same image in a different way. And I think that again showed the sort of contrast of our different sort of styles and maybe approaches to photography, and also. Sometimes if you process one in a slightly harsher way, it's for maybe putting on a screen. A softer one might print better. So there are two, different ways of looking at a particular image.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, what's interesting is we want to show you a couple of behind the scenes, as it were. And I know you mentioned the print there, Ben. I do, for everyone who comes along, I lug my Canon Pro 300 up with me, not on the train, that would be a bit extreme. But I have it with me. We have a selection of different photospeed papers, and I make sure everyone gets a couple of prints before they go. And we have a little printing session and we talk a little bit about that. So not only is it out in the field, but it's also post-processing every day. We usually sit together in the bar and just have a little soft drink or whatever you want, and a little sit down with the laptops. And Ben and I will both be there, and people will come and see both of us, and we'll share stuff on SD cards, etc. And we do a bit of processing as we go. And then on the final day or two, like I say, I'll make sure I do some printing for everyone. And that's always interesting because people maybe want to learn about that. So this was Oleg, who was fantastic on tour with us. He was really great fun. And this is a kind of example of maybe some of the broader vistas we were also looking at. And it was on the way to Malian Spouts, which is actually, depending on the group we have, we kind of go deeper or not as deep into that in terms of everyone's mobility, but maybe the time we have available as well. But this is the kind of view from actually just near where you park, and you head down into that area where there's a lovely river and waterfall as well. And all these, at this time of year, it's slightly later autumn. You have a lot of autumnal color on leaves on the ground and on the rocks and in the river, which is really cool. We'll see that in a sec. So we really encourage the individual, as we've said, the individual approach. It's really interesting to see how people talk to each other about that as they go. And as we walk down from just where we were showing you into this really kind of tangled oaks and birch and all sorts of beautiful trees down there. And Ben, this a few people you were helping kind of stop in and around this area, weren't you, just to help kind of make order in the chaos?
Yeah, this is one of those woodland. Well, there's about three or four different styles of woodland from the same spot. As Sam says, there's birch woodland, there's larch, and there's this oak area as well. And they've all got different challenges. The larch, some of them had lost their needles, some were still bright orange. The birch was sort of tangle of silver stems, and these oak areas had these very sort of dark stems, and the leaves are quite often some of the leaves are gone, some are still there, and there was this kind of just lovely haze of sort of yellowy brown color, and then the moss on the branches of the sort of tree, well, the tree trunks and the top branches, the moss really gave them a sort of contrast. So it was a very contrasting scene, but it was also one which was quite difficult to photograph. And it was really a question of picking out a detail that worked. And in fact, this worked in this particular image. Again, a square version of this works well, just for the sort of most of the left-hand side. You can you can crop it into a square version, or it works more as a sort of wider, slightly more panoramic version. But it's a question of picking out bits. And actually, here a slightly longer lens is very useful. So a variety, I would certainly recommend a variety of lenses on this tour. Certainly, in this case, picking out a detail from in a woodland, a telephoto lens can be particularly useful. Not a great big, huge, long telephoto, but just something which can give you that sort of compositional opportunity to focus in on a certain arrangement of branches and backgrounds, like in this shot.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the great thing is Ben and I, we've both been in and around those locations a number of times. And so when we're planning the days, which are not rigid, by the way, we will react a little bit to the group, a little bit to the conditions, a little bit to where we think people are going to get the most interest from, depending on what they're looking for. But we know the locations, very well. So beforehand, we can always prep everyone. Okay, during the day, you might be thinking of X, Y, Z in terms of kit, allowing for the fact everyone may see things differently, but I'm talking maybe in terms of tripods or whatever it might be. But it's a really beautiful location, this, and I really love that image because it's right up my street. That is without any reference points in a way, really just beautiful. This is, I wanted to put a couple of slightly weirder ones in here, sorry. But down in the actual river area, there were quite a few parts where there was swirling water and you get little white water on the top. And we were playing with two or three of us were playing with catching the movement of the water and slightly longer exposures to get that nice swirl, for example. And obviously, because it was autumnal, the first instinct is to shoot that in color. But actually, with a couple of people, I was talking about even using the black and white. Sometimes I use it a lot in woodland. Even if the image is going to be color, I will look at it through the live view in black and white to help me understand where the contrast points are and things like that. But whilst we were doing that, I actually said, oh, I reckon it will work in black and white generally because this rock is in the top half of the image and the swirls of the water in the bottom half. And so we were playing around with which way round. And it's kind of, I thought of the Scream, the painting The Scream. That's what that's what this image has for me. It's kind of got that weird kind of curviness. But a few of us lost ourselves for sort of half an hour in here playing with the detail. And I think coming away with something that was quite different, a lot of people were quite excited to have at least explored that to give them the, the how would you say, the visual flexibility so that when they're in different locations, they've got multiple ways to interpret it. And that then means you can be anywhere, anytime, any light, and still come away with some images, which I think is, an empowering thing to do, perhaps. Um, we go on from there to a different type of woodland or a different location called Falling Foss. And again, that's actually quite a spread out kind of area. So we tend to walk you through it, show you a few parts of it, and then we kind of let the group disperse a little. And quite a few of us were lingering around this rock and trying to craft this composition. And there's quite um, I find, let's say anyway, Ben, I find if I can have um, 10, 20 minutes just concentrating on one image, finessing millimeter by millimeter, that is such golden time because I'm just concentrating on one thing. I'm not worrying about anything else in life. I'm just concentrating on this one thing. And a couple of us were there playing with that, just trying to get that sort of sweep of the bottom of the trunk with obviously that really green rock and that little a couple of people were saying they could see kind of a devil's face in here, the eye and the nose and the mouth down there. Not sure what they'd been having the night before. It must have been that Yorkshire beer that was flowing. But it's a beautiful area again. There's a waterfall there. There's all manner of more enclosed and larger view kind of spaces there as well. Another one, actually, this is a phone one, Ben, of mine, actually. Again, exploring the black and white thing, maybe with reference to some sort of Japanese art in the back of my mind going on here. But it's like Ben was saying, with the flexibility of your phone, having it just there, if you do happen to spot something quite fun in a reflection, in a puddle, in a stream, whatever it might be, it's very quick and easy just to shoot that on the phone, hovering over the water, which with a tripod and camera can be a bit of a fuss, can't it, Ben? And you don't want to fall in or get yourself wet, or whatever it might be. with
No,
all
I
of
mean, and
that.
also you can drop your phone in the water and it doesn't matter too much. You can
Yeah,
generally pull it out. You can drop your camera in the water and it might go wrong. So, but I think this was, if I remember rightly, I think I remember working on this and with your phone. It was literally just a puddle, wasn't it? It was just
yeah,
something really, a really tiny space of water in which you saw this really lovely image. And I thought, golly, that's absolutely beautiful and amazing. Where did you do that? And you said over there on that rock, and on the rock was this tiny little sort of, puddle about, 50 centimeters wide. And I thought, golly, that was really well spotted. Of, you know, I know on the last trip you came up with some very beautiful images, but this was one of the ones that I thought was a little bit of magic as well, because it was seen in a particularly small space, in a particularly, where you wouldn't expect to find something, and it was a
yeah.
very beautiful image as
Well,
well. So
very
no,
kind
that
of you, but
just well, it's all about sort of taking your time, I think, and again, that's one thing that on these tours that with Light and Land, we do try and we try and ensure that you have time in a place so that you have got time to look around, you have got time to make the images you want, and you have got time to explore. And I think all that's really built into this tour. I mean, the only limitation is that it's in November, so the daylight is relatively limited. But we try and make sure we spend enough time in each location that you can find interesting images. And I think although I say it's November, November's actually got really good light, really interesting
mm,
colours, and there's a lot of pluses about November. But the one minus is actually including including that dawn and dusk are not at horrible hours of the
that's
day.
true. That is a
Um,
positive thing.
that is a major positive. But you do have to kind of, and also, but you get sort of interesting low light much of the day. You get interesting overcast conditions. It's a good time of the year for photography as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, like we said earlier, we kind of had all kind of weather conditions, and actually that was apparent in a couple of places where we did a repeat visit, just in a slightly different location. And just to reiterate on what Ben said, we don't race you around from place to place. We do not rush things. It's usually a couple of locations in the day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and then you've got real time to get into it. And this is actually up on the moorland area because we sort of go across the moors towards the Mallean Spout area, and then we come back towards Whitby and Robin Hood's Bay. And as you go over, as you sort of cross over that um, the hills over the moorland, as I call it, there's some really beautiful kind of larger expanses of space where we can just walk into and explore. And this image, Ben, was yours. We talked about cropping things and whatnot. Did you see this originally as a square? Were you framing up as a square?
I think I probably did actually, yes.
Yeah,
I felt that more sky would not have assisted it at all, and the foreground was just a little bit too samey for too long. So I thought a square just gave it the right proportions. You could pitch the horizon just a little bit above the halfway mark, to give slightly less sky, but the sky that you have got has got some interest in it. So it's got those two. I think they're probably contrails, but I mean there's a sort of cross of those clouds
mm,
that formed, and the fence that leads round to it. And the foreground has got quite a lot of detail in it with those darker areas as well as the light ones. And I think that proportion just worked with that image. As I say, more sky or more foreground would not necessarily have helped, partly because squeezing it slightly top and bottom gave a bit more emphasis on the fence. Um, you could have obviously done a wide, landscape format, but I think it didn't need more fence either. So I
no.
felt that was just about the right sort of end point.
Definitely, and there's some be that lovely light on the fence and those grasses were really beautiful. And a lot of people we kind of when we find something sometimes in a location, if we sort of call people over and maybe say think about this if they're looking around like they need some help. Other times they're deep in concentration on something. But just here, I remember three or four people we were talking about it and talking about also different shutter speeds and things on the grass because sometimes when that grass is moving, it can be quite nice to soften it. So we were playing all of us, weren't we? But I think Ben, you got this one right. And I wanted to show everyone a little bit of a behind the scenes because Andy brought his 76-foot tripod with him, and we had great fun watching him sort of faff about with it. But but that was again something where a few people took away different types of images from that. And then in the evening, we had a bit of a chat about it and walked through, who thought what about different things. And so there will be a lot of that feedback. You're not on your own on these things. There is a camaraderie always. Ben and I try to foster that as much as we can by basically ribbing each other mercilessly for a week. But also, it's interesting to see different people's opinions and how they shoot and all the rest of it. So actually, I'm just going to pop something up on the screen with the dates of this year's trip as well, because as we've said, it is in November. So I'm just going to pop that up on the screen now. And if you would like to join us, we would love to have you along. There are a couple of spaces available. So as we move on from those moors or that moorland kind of area, I wanted to show you this because we had different light on a couple of occasions where we passed over there and we stopped each time. But what I think probably the thing that caught me from that area, Ben, was that there's such a broad sort of vista, which with the eyes can be quite appealing when we're physically there because you see it and you think, oh wow, what a big view. But actually with the camera, it can be quite difficult. And sometimes certainly horizontally, if it's fairly flat, if there's no sort of no huge mountains or anything like that, it can sort of fall a bit short in image making terms if there's no big conditions or anything like that. So we were talking with a few people about, well, how do we balance this issue with what we're seeing physically when we're there versus what the actual camera will record and how that will translate too. So we talked a little bit about mood and we were talking about color and black and white. And for me, I am a black and white sort of a guy, should we say. I actually quite like these soft muted days where it's kind of just quite you know what I mean, low contrast kind of vibes. So we were talking a little bit about that. And, this image is just kind of indicative, I suppose, of the scene. And so I wanted to show it to you. But there's quite a lot of this grass and these sort of tussocky things and nice lines in the landscape. So we were trying to talk about how to find shape when something actually looks a little bit vast perhaps is difficult. The funny one people always mention to me is Grand Canyon. That's one of those places that if you've ever been or if anyone watching has been lucky enough to go, but when you stand there and you look at it, you go, wow, that's amazing. And actually, it's really quite difficult to take a, a captivating image of the Grand Canyon in a way from the top when you're just looking because everything is just one big line and a big hole in front of you basically. So anyway, that's just a fun topic to discuss. But once we come off the moors and that greyness of my imagery, we get into something a little bit more colourful, which is Staithes, which is a really kind of interesting location for a number of different reasons. But the famous, I suppose, in landscape photography, there's a kind of nice viewpoint looking down over Staithes, and we do take people there because there's a number of kind of images that people may have seen from there. And in this particular time when we went with the group, there was sort of changing light. The sun was just coming in from the right-hand side, and you can probably see, or I particularly love, this little red door down here with this sort of splash of light on it. But that did cause a bit of a discussion, didn't it, Ben?
It did actually. The red door. It was kind of love it or hate it, and I really like it. I think it's a really beautiful little focal point, and especially if you. This is an image that I've again cropped into a square as well. And again, this is one of the things we discuss on this tour is you stand in a certain place, you make an image, and then actually later on in the day you think actually that might work better in a sort of slightly different way, and that's the kind of thing where we end up with discussions over in the evening when we go back to the hotel, and then maybe even over dinner, and then later on, and they kind of rumble on for a week. This one works as well as a square, cutting off the right hand buildings, in fact, and that focuses slightly more attention on the harbour and the boat and that little red door, which is almost a little bit, as a prime feature, it's a little bit too central in this image. But there's the kind of compositional things, you can say, well, I don't like the sun there. Well, actually, if you wait 10 minutes, it'll probably be off there,
Mm.
off the door, and it won't be there at all, so you lose that little shaft of sunlight. And I think that was just actually, personally, I think it was quite a lucky moment, and I really like it. But if you didn't, you don't have to wait too long, especially in November when the sun is quite low in the sky anyway, and it'll move on, and basically the lighting will change within 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah. And
Remember,
actually, sorry, Ben, carry
I
on.
was going to say we looked at this scene on the way down into the
Yeah.
village, and and it wasn't really working very well. The light was sort of different. It was a bit, I don't know, it was coming from in front of us too much. And then this was on the way back out when we looked again, and suddenly it worked really well. And it was a much more beautiful and more effective light for that particular scene. So again, time of day, light changes as you go through the day, and it's important to remember that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you mentioned the coming back up because we do come down and past this viewpoint in and out of stays, as it were. So it did vary, and also the tide has varied as well. And so we will kind of try to choose the best time based on the day and the conditions, so we get a little bit of different light here for you. And actually, this is one of only this and near the hotel are kind of probably the only two times where we're actually in a smallish location together, kind of looking at the same sort of view. But that said, there's different ways to interpret it, even from that one standing place. So I know, Ben, you and I were working with people with longer lenses, saying, well, we can do the broader view, and if there is that splash of light or the raking light, it's really, a nice thing to do. But if it's a little flatter or you just want to focus in on something, there is that kind of higgledy-piggledy nature. I just about got that out of the rooftop. So I know a couple of us, you and I, were both playing with this, weren't we, Ben? And a lot of people had, we had their big 7200s or the 300s out having a look at this.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it worked really well as a tighter shot, just to give an idea of how compact that the houses are, how compact that whole village is. It's a very beautiful place, and it's got lots of potential, certainly. And I think again, exploring that and just you sometimes go to a place and think, right, well, that's the shot,
Mm.
and then you realize actually no, that's what it might be what everybody else has done. And much as I'm against doing that kind of thing, I think actually somewhere like this, if you're going to go to stays, you may as well go and stand in that particular place and take the wider view, but also at the same time look around and try and find something a bit more, a bit more personal, a bit different, or a bit, something that enhances that wider view and gives you a slightly different, a different sort of alternative take on the same place. And I think that's something that we can explore during this tour.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good location, and down by the harbour, the boats, there's lots of fishing paraphernalia and things like that if you want to do some sort of more abstract, extract, whatever you want to call it, sort of stuff. And I think actually, Ben, we had a smashing lunch there, didn't we, as
Was going to
well?
say the best tea shop in
Yeah.
Yorkshire Coast.
So,
Possibly.
little
Or
secret, we'll take you if you're there. We'll take you for a nice
yeah.
tea and scones and all the rest of it. Actually, there was probably a bit too much eating going on there, but we all ended up in the same place, which was quite fun.
Yeah.
Um, we do then, and actually, there's a few locations that we've not covered here because we just don't have the time. Okay, because we sneak a few coastal and another woodland one in depending on availability. But we do spend a bit of time in Whitby, both in and around the town and also by the piers. The pier structures are really interesting there, and actually, there's quite a unique amount of access that you can get on the top and underneath these as well. You can walk through some of them, and so even exploring close-up details. We had some quite interesting weather. When a leader says interesting weather, what they mean is it was raining a bit and it was sunny and it was kind of crazy. But we had a couple of different types of conditions whilst we were there. So some people in the more dramatic conditions were playing there's some wooden planks that run all the way down these piers. And actually, when they were wet and catching some light, and there was some big dark skies, contrasty skies behind, a couple of people got some really fantastic images. I remember printing one for Andy, I think, on the last day, which is a nice vertical one of those. But also, I was working with a couple of different people on long exposures, and I was saying, well, just really, play with time. We were talking about a few seconds and seeing what that did, and how that was still very recognizable as the water coming in, and you can see the structure in it, maybe. But I also played with a couple of people doing much longer exposures, a few minutes, to really kind of get the water as this sort of gassy, actually, in a way, isn't it? It's more gas than water at this point. And again, maybe the idea there is that softness versus the hardness of the pier. The structure is very definite, but it also has this beautiful curve. So we were talking about positioning of horizon, how far in the pier, line goes, and all the rest of it. But that area, actually, Ben, is very rich photographically, isn't it, of stuff to play with.
Whitby's very rich, actually. I mean, certainly the piers are fantastic. The piers are sort of graphically very impressive. The certainly the boarding on top, the the structures on the pier, the whole pier itself, and the relationship of that sort of solid structure with the water, as is illustrated here really beautifully. There's absolutely masses of potential around that area, and Whitby town itself is very interesting as well. And there's the Abbey, of course, as well as a whole range of other features that we can look at, and we do on this tour. But the piers, I think, are probably probably a highlight, and also give the sort of most creative opportunities around Whitby. So although you're in a town, you think, well, it's this kind of town photography. Well, once you get out on the pier, it's rather more conventional landscape techniques and landscape photography. So you've got all kinds of opportunities to make images around Whitby. It's a really, really good place.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned the Abbey because we do go up and we do look at the Abbey sometimes at sort of dusk time, and it's quite nice then, and you get a view down to Whitby and the lights coming on, and actually a different view of the piers. So a few people had different images from up there.
Hmm.
And also a really cool pizza place. Sorry, I keep mentioning the food, but that's my modus operandus, as it were. But it's really important. We do look after you. We try to make sure you have fun across all the day. It's not, in a way, it's not just about the photography, right? We want you to have a good week away, and part of that is the social side of things too. But let me just, because that's it for the images, I'm just going to stop the sharing of the images there. 9th to the 14th of November is when we're going this year. And as we say, there are just a couple of places available. So we would love you to come. We hope we've enticed you with some of the images and given you a bit more background about them and also about Ben and I and how we approach our tours. Any other thoughts just before I wrap up, Ben?
No, I mean, I'll just say the one of the things about this area is, it might seem like it's only on the doorstep or whatever, but there's a huge variety of subjects. I think the way that we worked together gave people a slightly different sort of views of how they might approach certain subjects, and I think that really enhanced the tour. And no, we had last year we had extremely good feedback, and there were lots of really happy photographers at the end who had an astonishingly varied number of images them
Hmm.
individually, and also they all kind of varied from person to person. So everybody had seen things differently, and I think went home with some really unusual images, which they were very pleased with.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of international visitors we had on that tour as well. So if you are watching from overseas, it's a great part of the UK to explore. But as Ben says, even if you're in the UK and you think, well, how glamorous is it? It is extremely varied and you will get some different weather. And like Ben says, you'll come away with a lot of good images. But listen, we appreciate you if you've watched us all the way through this, listening to us talk about the images and the locations. We appreciate you giving us that time. Ben and I would love to see you in North Yorkshire, and we'll promise you a decent cream tea and some good photography as well. All right. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again, and Ben will, I'm sure, on one of these things very soon.